Welcome, everyone. We are glad you can join us today for our noontime chat on making high-impact plant combinations. I'm Laura Iyer, and today I will be sharing tips on how to create eye-catching plant designs. For those of you who are not familiar, the 10-Minute University trademark includes short classes, videos, and handouts on essential gardening for you, the home gardener. Oregon State owns the trademark, and Clackamas County Master Gardeners develop and manage the program. Today's class is the 18th in our series of 21 webinars. With the help of these webinars, we hope to help you master your garden. For the complete lineup, please visit the Clackamas Master Gardeners website. Today, Priscilla Robinson is co-host and will facilitate the question and answers in the Q&A box. You may post your questions throughout the presentation in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. Sean Van Doren will be monitoring and posting pertinent links in the chat box. She will also post the plant names as we talk about them during the presentation. So let's get started. The most satisfying element about gardening is when you create, either by plan or by accident, wonderful plant combinations. It can be like assembling an outfit, or I like to think of it as creating scenery on a stage. It's a matter of blending similarities and differences in a pleasing proportion to one another. This photo is from a garden in North Portland. This is Phormium tricolor with an orange echinacea and a purple euphorbia. One of the things that we're going to talk about later is the color wheel, and you'll find that orange and purple are complementary colors, and they pick up the very fine color on the edges of the leaves of the flax, Phormium. So today we're going to talk about 3 principles behind high impact plant combinations. Become familiar with using the color wheel, learning about the value of color, its intensity or depth, seeing how high impact designs are composed, and how tapestry works in a garden. So there are 3 principles that are basic to any design. They are color, texture, and form. And you use these items to create contrast. Flower color comes in monochromatic, analogous, and complementary. So the definition of monochromatic is using one color in your design. So they're easy designs to create because they all come from the same family. Analogous colors are groups of 3 colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. And when I show a picture of the color wheel, I'll show you what they are. An analogous look gives you a really rich monochromatic look. Colors that are opposite on the color wheel are complementary colors, like red and green. And it's the contrast of the complementary colors that gives your design a really vibrant impact and a really rich look. Next is texture. Bold, spiky, smooth, feathery, lacy leaves. And the form is mounding, spiked, columnar, trailing. We'll go into these a little bit more. So let's put these items together and look at photos and see how they work. Your eye sees color, and it doesn't care if it's a plant or art object, hardscape, foliage, or a flower. In this photo, the dark colors of the Semicifuga black negligee contrast with the yellow Acancola aureola. And the soft blue-green of this hellebore picks up the softness of the yellow in the Hack-and-Chloe. Texture has two key aspects, shape and tactile. Shape is the visual outlines of the leaf. So, for example, the Hack-and-Chloe has long grassy leaves. The conifer has frilly leaves. Or you can have the palmate look, which looks like your hand, as in the Semicifuga. Tactile means what does it feel like? And it can be ribby or puckery or very shiny, very matte, where it has very soft matte color, or it can be fuzzy. Form is the three-dimensional shape of the plant or the plant mass. So when you're considering putting a design together, think about putting different forms together. So you could have a tall columnar plant with the roundy shape of a barberry, for example. Doing that creates interest in your design. You want to decide on a color scheme, whether it's a hot palette or a warm palette, contrasted with a cool or cold palette. So in this warm palette, and it's a container that I did in my backyard, it's in a red pot. And when you're designing a pot or a container, the color of the pot is as important because as the plants and the flowers you put in, because it affects it. So always think what your container's like when you start putting your plants inside. So here I put in a yellow abutilon, and the common name is a flowering maple, with red, orange begonias, an apricot calibrachoa, and a yellow helichrysum, which is also called the licorice plant. Then here's a purple salvia that is growing underneath the container. And purple is one of the opposite colors on the color wheel of the red and the apricot color. And I repeated the yellow and helichrysum in the yellow of the abutilon. In the cool palette, you have the really soft silver of the Senecio angel wings. It has a fuzzy feeling. I love this one a lot. And the blue ansomia. So look at how the blue or violet almost picks up the softness of the silvery in the Senecio. It's a beautiful combination. Warm palettes mean hot energy, high energy. So here we have a very simple combination of orange begonias and hot pink impatiens. And then with creeping Jenny, which is a line trailing plant. This leads your eye up to the rust, which picks up the orange. But what makes this combination is this blue steel of the conifer. And the color of the blue steel is as intense as the hot pink and the orange. This is great. Cool palettes can be very restful. And when you assemble a group of foliage that all kind of blend in together in a sea of green, it's very nice to look at. So here, the icy blue of the Brunnera picks up the icy green of the Fatsia. Then you have the frilly leaves of the conifer and the very jagged leaves of the fern. So in this combination, there are pronounced differences in the leaf sizes, shapes, and patterns. Here's the traditional color wheel. Here's a color wheel with plants. Red dahlia, yellow rose, and blue foxglove. The secondary colors are orange, which is a combination of red and yellow, green, which is a combination of yellow and blue, and purple, which is a combination of red and blue. So the complementary colors are red and green, they're opposite. The analogous colors would be these three. See how they're very different shades? When you get these guys together, it looks really rich in a combination in your garden. These three would be in the green family and the purple and blues, excuse me. And then look at how hot these are. It's great. So the jelly bean theory is an idea I came up with when I was talking with my clients about how to explain a flow or pattern in a garden, and also how to describe a hot or warm palette and a cool palette when you're putting plants together. A jar of Kirkland jelly beans has 49 colors, so your combination can have 49 colors, your garden can have 49 colors. But if you look at the jelly bean jar, your eye hops around because it's trying to fly a flow or a pattern. I think that's a natural tendency of your eye. It's always looking for a pattern. It's like a Jackson Pollock painting. Here we go. So see how the yellows, you can't necessarily follow the yellows around or the reds. Your eye's hopping around trying to find out where the color is coming from. So I took the jar of jelly beans and I was going to divide them into 49 colors. That made me nuts. So I divided them into 10 colors, 10 shades of colors. Then I put the warm palette colors together and the cool palette colors together in glass vases. So now you can see all the colors, but your eye flows very easily from one to the next. Cool palette are usually pastel colors, very soft colors. When you're creating a design in a container or in your garden, you want to avoid the polka dot look, where you have one of everything just scattered about. I've had clients in the past ask me to their garden because they don't like it. But when I go to their garden, they have really cool plants. And often what has happened is that you have a plant, you come home from the nursery because you liked it, and then you didn't know where to put it. So you just put it in a hole. And over time, you have this polka dot look. And so if the client is willing and has the time and labor to do it, I can rearrange them, the plants for them, and all of a sudden it flows. So they have the same plants in their garden, but now there's a flow and they love their garden. It's nice to do. In this photo, I want you just to look at the colors and not try to think of what the plant names are. See the pink flower in the very back? This was the original part of the garden. And then as the gardener had time and worked in her garden, the garden grew. But you can also see how her color choices changed too, from soft colors like the gladiola into these hot orange and reds of a hot garden. Now this garden has high energy, but what has happened is the pink no longer fits and it's just kind of lost. Purple and white are transition colors, and they help you look from one hot color, like these colors down here, to these colors. So you use transition colors, and they are white, lavender, purple, blue, and gray in between your hot colors, and that gives your eye a place to rest. But it's not jarring then to go from a deep red to a hot orange. It's just a trick. In this case, purple must be of the same intensity as the reds and the oranges, or it's going to get lost, just like that pink gladiola. The changing colors of outdoor light really affects the intensity of your colors, and it can change the appearance of the color. Colors appear more saturated in the summer sun and more subdued in winter light or shade. Colors are also brighter in the morning in that clear sun and deeper in the evening light. This photo has red monarda, and this is black-eyed Susan called Rebecca Goldstern. See how the intensity or the depth of color in both the monarda and the black-eyed Susan are the same. That's why they look so good together. Remember this yellow. This is a photo of Crocosmia Lucifer and a white Shasta daisy. And I really like this photo because the colors are so crisp. The crispness of the white really makes the Crocosmia shine. But what if, instead of the Shasta daisy, you had the gold of the Rebecca, the yellow, hot yellow of the Rebecca? So pick up that yellow and put it here. Can you see how the difference in intensity and excitement would change just by changing out that color, that plant? Here's a continuation of that garden we saw before with the pink gladiola. So if you have an art object, and I always like to have art somewhere in the garden, if you put this rust art over here with the echinacea and the monarda, it would be lost because the colors are too similar. But if you put it in white, all of a sudden it shines. And this white gives you your eye a place to rest with all the hotness going over here. And here's that little pink gladiola off in the corner. Same colors, different shapes. In this photo, while all the colors are tints and tones of purple and orange, you have different forms and textures, which creates drama. And that makes this whole slide a winning combination. And purple and orange are sort of complementary colors. This is in a garden called Flora Magoria in Southwest Portland, and it's just an amazing garden. So these are the seed heads of an allium that they painted orange and purple. And yet they've left some natural just for contrast. Now you have different shades of purple surrounding this combination. You have the violet phlox, the purple salvia, and this orange daylily down in the corner. Here we have a great example of using analogous colors. We have three colors in both the flowers and the leaves. So there are differences in size and shapes of the flowers and the leaves. And see this coleus down here? It's a really deep bronze because it's in the shade. This is the same plant, but it's in the hot summer sun and it's more orange. And that's how lighting can make a difference in how your garden looks. This is in the garden of a designer named Darcy Daniels. And this is along her driveway up into the back where her studio is. It's just stunning. So here you have coleus, lilies, abutilon, the cigar plant called Kufia, sedges, which are really bronze in color, and this is a digiplexus called illumination flame. So they're all shades and tints of orange, but they go together so wonderfully. And you can have a soft combination of this too. This is an apricot daylily, and it's reflecting the cinnamon brown of the indumentum, which is underneath the rhododendron lily leaf. Without the lily here, you would not particularly even notice that this cinnamon is going on. And the indumentum feels like felt. This is in a garden in Southwest Portland, and this is outside their sliding glass doors of their bedroom. So contrast the shininess of the leaves in the foreground with the matte texture of the fern and the Chamaecyparis in the background. So you have spikiness and rounding, and all contributes to the color, texture, and form, all in shades of green. This is highly interesting. Then you have a water feature and garden art. And next to this is their hot tub. Then you go past the hot tub through a gate, and you walk down a path between the house and the fence, and suddenly you see this. Isn't this cool? So here you have Hack and Chloe all gold and Liriope. So what if this green Liriope was replaced with black mondo grass? All of a sudden, you would have an entirely different feeling and energy. And the black mondo grass is like the black background that I chose for these slides. It makes the surrounding color pop because black is the absence of color. The cement of this patio keeps the Liriope, or if you chose black mondo grass, from traveling elsewhere. This is back in that garden, Floramegoria. You have a really cool succulent. Look how interesting all those leaves are. Then they have rocks that are carved like snails on a gravel bed, and then with green around it. So here you have a really good example of high contrast in texture. And the succulent is the star of it all. This is on the driveway of a garden that we visited, and this hedge provides a great backdrop for this combination, and the hedge surrounds their interior garden. So this combination is in a metal trough on legs that's about 3 feet wide and 8 feet long. And so they've taken common petunias, common lobelia, and planted 3 agave plants that have apricot flowers. Who does this? This is really cool. So interesting. Completely unusual. You would never expect to find this. And then you have a whimsical dragonfly just to make everything more interesting. The apricot color is of the same intensity as the lobelia and the white. And that's why this whole combination works. Or you could have 3 concrete elements rather than 3 agave. They're in a bed of hostas. And Sean, when Priscilla, Sean, and I were doing a rehearsal on Monday, she said, that looks like water. And now that's what I see. I see a rippling water. This is a pruned boxwood hedge. This is a cotinus, and the color brings out the blue of the hosta. Doesn't that look like water now that you've heard that? When you're creating a high impact plant design, you need a leading player. What's going to bring your eye to that section of your garden or to that container? So you want harmony and contrast. Harmony means likeness, and contrast means difference. So when you combine harmony and contrast, you get drama. And here you have the main player of these lilies, which brings your eye to this corner in the garden. And then the purple of this eucomis picks up the deep purple in the lily. And the echinacea has deep rose pink, which picks up the gray as the purple fades to white in the lily. And then it's surrounded by the sea of green, which provides the backdrop for all these colors. This is in a garden in Southwest Portland. The star of this combination, when you're looking at it, is this hack and Chloe in a red pot. And if the lighting was a little bit different, you would see that this grass really is lime green in a red pot. That's cool. Then you have the red of the barberry, and this variety is Admiration. This is a great barberry because it's dwarf. It always stays this size and it never needs pruning. Cool. Then you have this rust-colored globe. So the globe, the pot, and the barberry make a triangle. And when I'm doing a garden for clients, I look for triangles in how to place plants. And once I find that triangle, whether it's color or a shape or form, then I know exactly where to put the plant. So one of the ways that you move your eye through a garden is the repetition of color or shape or a plant. In this case, you have the grass of the hack and Chloe, and over here, you have the Niscanthus grass. This is Morning Light and one of my favorites. So your eye moves from a similar form to grasses. This is, I believe, an Andina called Gulfstream, and the new growth on Gulfstream is red and orange, which picks up the barberry. This whole garden works together beautifully, and that creates tapestry. So tapestry is the art of weaving plants together in a garden to create a pleasing combination. This is in my garden. So down here in the corner is Santalina Lemon Fizz, and it's in a red pot. I really like that combination. This is 9-bark, and the name is Physocarpus Little Devil. Then I have Artemisia Silver Mound and this white Impatience. This white picks up the insignificant white flowers on this 9-bark. And the 9-bark has kind of a deep chocolate brown, bronzy look. And that's why I put this concrete ball here. Then next to it is Agastache Apricot Summer. Then white Impatience, so I can move my eye around my garden. And then a yellow grass called Ogon. And if you see Ogon in a plant name, it almost always means yellow or gold. And then up here is Weigela, Wine and Roses, which is my favorite Weigela. And it's got burgundy leaves, which picks up the darkness of the Physocarpus. And Weigela has hot pink flowers when it blooms. Next to it is an Osmanthus goshiki. And go in Japanese means 5. And depending on the maturity of the leaves of this goshiki plant, you can have 5 different colors on the leaves. So it's really got year-round interest. This is a shade garden. So a successful combination of plants that get along have a common thread. They have the sun or shade requirements and the same water requirements. So when you're putting together your combinations, make sure that you always think about that part. This is a garden in Canby, and it's a shade garden. This is a hosta Francis Williams, and it's a great hosta. It has puckery, blue-green leaves, and it's edged in yellow chartreuse. And then the gardener has put in Lady's Mantle, Alchemilla mollis, which has chartreuse flowers. Then she picks up the lemon yellow also with a sucra in the back. Then there's a purple oxalis, which picks up the deep purple red. Now this is Stilby, and then that form is repeated in the pink of Stilby. It's really well put together. Then this rose wants to get in the picture. This is the start of her rose bed. This is my garden along my driveway. So it's hot, it's in full sun, and the driveway makes everything hot. My triangle is this orange-yellow gaillardia right here, the Admiration barberry, and the lupin, which has orange-yellow flowers on the same stalk. This was really hot look for me, a little bit too much. So I put in this lavender scabiosa. The name is lavender blue. And then I put in a hardy salvia, and this is part of their skyscraper series. So this has deep red purple blooms, which picks up the lavender. But I needed something to calm down this design so I could look at it. A design to be impactful can be very simple too. The straw color of the grass mimics the steel twigs in the nest. You're creating an illusion. You're setting a stage. It's impactful because every time you look at this, you stop and enjoy it. This is from a garden of a friend of mine who has since passed, and she made the nest. Blue is her favorite color. And every time I see this, I always remember her. So it's impactful for me. This is in my backyard, and it's across the aisle from that scene that we just saw with the Santolina and the Agastache. I had a rock put down here and had an indentation, and I thought I could use it as a bird bath, but it wasn't ever deep enough to have water, and the birds never liked it. So I put a pot there, and I chose a bronze pot that picked up the bronze of my carex, which is called Bronze Perfection. This was the very first time I had experimented with succulents and found out I really liked it. Then behind it is a lavender with Spanish lavender. And underneath is purple pansies. Then up here is apricot summer, that Agastache. So the Agastache apricot picks up the bronziness of both the bowl and the carex. And the purple pansies pick up the purple, the lavender, and lavender, purple, and orange are complementary sort of on the color wheel. And sometimes Mother Nature creates her own design. These pansies appeared in the middle of the Artemisia silver mound that's been next to that lemon Santolina. And so every time I went by this, it made me smile. It's like this family of pansies that are saying, "Hi, Mom." So the pansies stayed there for about 3 years and then they went away. Thank you for coming. If you have questions, you can go to cmastergardeners.org. And for the copy of this presentation will be available in a few days. Go to the 10-Minute University and look under videos. Thank you, guys. Hi, Priscilla.
Hey, thanks, Laura. That presentation really got to some basics and to some very sophisticated design ideas. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to remind everyone who's viewing today, we were throwing out a lot of terminology and information, and all that information is going to be available to you on our website. The video has been recorded, and as Laura said, it'll be available for viewing in a day or so. So if you get a little tongue-tied with the names of some of those plants, like I do, you'll be able to review the video and then get that information and perhaps find those plants. So we've had some good questions, and a lot of them are about the terminology. And so I want to remind them that that list of terms is connected to your reminder email that you got perhaps yesterday or the day before. And so you'll be able to find it. Lots of people are mentioning that they love the presentation, but I don't have any specific questions right now. So if you have questions, we've got about another 10 or 15 minutes to talk to Laura specifically and answer them online. If you, type in those questions down at the bottom. And let's see, I remember that I had a question after seeing this in our rehearsal. In how do we anticipate or try to get our gardens looking like some of the things that we saw in your presentation, like getting all those flowers blooming at the same time so that we're getting those contrasts? What do you have some tips on plant selection?
Plant tags. They are the source of really good information. When you look at a plant tag, you have to remember sometimes that they are pretty general. Like if they can be used in Peoria, Kansas, as well as their Portland, Oregon. And we are known in the Willamette Valley as the Garden of Eden because we can grow so many things with such great growing conditions that often our plants are bigger than what the plant tag says. For example, I have a plant called Hot Lips, which is a salvia. It's a shrub salvia, and it has great white and red flowers that look like snapdragons. It's a deciduous salvia. The plant tag says 3 by 3, and I believed it rather than using my experience that it's going to be way bigger. So I planted it right on the corner. It is 4 feet high by almost 8 feet. It's just too happy. And so constantly I have to prune it because it's right on the corner where you make. And I just forgot. I didn't know it would be that happy. So I look at the plant tags. A lot of it is going in a nursery or going through garden tours to find out what the size of a plant really is. One of the hardest things for new gardeners to know is that when they bring the plant home, it's probably not the mature size. You're buying like a 1 gallon or even a 2 gallon pot or 4-inch pot. And it is going to grow. And especially you see this in plantings that landscapers do when they have a model house. They planted all these plants so close together that the homeowner in 3 years is going to have to undo it all. It's just very sad for me that all that plant material is either going to go to waste, or they're not going to be happy with it.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I really loved about that shot of your garden is that you have your perennials and your woody shrubs, which are your foundation. And then you fill in with like your impatiens, which is just the little annual that you're going to pop in there. So that's really, something that people want to think about when they're designing their garden. To replant an entire bed of annuals is not only expensive, but it's very time consuming. So, you know, figure out your triangle, figure out your watering system. You want to plant like plants that have the same culture. So sunny plants together, shady plants together, ones that like it a little dry together, right? Any other cultural ideas that you want to get out when designing a high impact garden?
One of the things I find usually with new gardeners is that they make the planting beds too narrow, maybe just a couple of feet. If you can have the room, if you can make your beds 4 feet to 8 feet long, then you can achieve that tapestry look, which is that fullness that gives you so much enjoyment. So that gives you, what you would like to have is 3 layers. So you have your shrub plants, like you were talking about, the woody shrubs. Then you can have your lower shrubs, and then you mix in your perennials with them. And then the very last layer would be your ground cover. And I use annuals in a new garden as the jewels on the crown or the icing on the cake. So until the other plants grow in, then you've got at least something to look at that makes your garden look finished.
Nice.
Mhm.
Okay. So Amy has a question about what are some of your go-to plants? And I'm wondering if she's thinking go-to as high impact or maybe just hardy. Is there one that fits both those criteria?
So in a shade garden, the shrub I have as my go-to plant is Sarcococa, which is, I think Sweet Box is the name of it. It's has very shiny leaves. It's evergreen, and in the January, December even, sometimes November, depending on our winter, it has these insignificant flowers, but it perfumes your whole garden and it smells like Daphne. In a sun garden, Nandina, the dwarf Nandinas is my go-to plant because it's so well behaved. Nothing eats either of these plants, and they come in great colors. And they're both evergreen. One of the rules of thumb when you're doing garden design, and it's very hard for me to do because I'm not naturally inclined that way, is your garden should be 1/3 conifers. And the way that you can achieve that now is that there are so many great dwarf conifers that you can use in a residential garden. You don't have to have 40 acres to achieve that look.
Nice. What are your thoughts about year-round foliage or color in a shade garden, as many plants go dormant during our winter, such as the hostas? So what other plants are a good option for that?
In a shade garden in particular, Brunnera, pulmonaria are low-growing perennials that keep their color all year round. Heuchera. The thing that you have to remember is that they're going to have winter damage, and at some point they're just going to look raggedy. So when you do your winter cleanup, you will cut them off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, do you ever change the color palettes in one garden by season? And like say cool for spring and hot for summer? Is that an option? Or how would you do that? Change color palettes?
It depends on the summer light and the winter light. So winter light is so kind, well, there's not much of it, that you could do a cool or hot garden. It would be expensive to change it out all the time, but I do that in my containers, in my winter containers and my summer containers. Then my winter containers I usually have lemon cypress, that little dwarf cypress, that's lemon cypress. It's dwarf when you buy it, but just remember, at maturity, it's going to be 8 to 10 feet. But you buy them in a nursery when they're this tall, you put them in a container, and you surround it with violas or pansies, heuchera, Lysimachia, that creeping Jenny. Then in the summer, I have hot begonia, and the one I like is called Angel Wings Begonia, and it has hot orange flowers. It's a trailing plant, and it gets sometimes 4 feet down. It's great. And then the one I like is called Bonfire. But the rest of the containers, I usually don't mess with because I'm exhausted by that time.
Right.
The plants that I use a lot in containers are fuchsias, hardy fuchsias. The thing to remember about hardy fuchsias is that they love full sun. They're not like your annual fuchsias that you would buy, like maybe a hanging container. And they last all year. They come back every year. I mean, in the winter, they're deciduous, so they lose all their leaves, but they'll come back for you and be better the next year.
That sounds like great advice.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a funny story about begonias. I lived in the Northeast for a period of time, and my father had beautiful tuberous begonias out in the backyard. And all of a sudden, a big thunderstorm came, and along with it came hail. And I ran out in this thunderstorm with as many umbrellas as I could find. And I covered all of the tuberous begonias and protected them from this huge hailstorm. And his neighbor next door also had tuberous begonia, and they were kind of in competition. And he came over to see what kind of damage had happened at my father's garden. And of course, the umbrellas were put away. And he couldn't understand how his bed had just been massacred, and my father's begonias were beautiful and perky. So, you know, even as a child, I was really devoted to keeping those gardens looking good and bright. So I don't see any more questions coming in right now. So if you're thinking about typing something in, this is your last chance. Oh, yes.
So that's interesting. When you work the clinic at Master Gardeners and you get a question coming in about what's eating my plant, often
Yes.
when you ask enough questions, you find there was a hailstorm, and that can cause that damage. So sometimes damage is caused not by a plant or a pathogen or a bug, it's an environmental damage.
That's a really good point, because there are bugs that get into my garden, and I want them out of there. But I always do my due diligence. I do some investigating, looking at the bottom of leaves, looking at the shape of the perhaps chew mark, where it's happening in the garden, if one plant's being affected and not another. So before you go to the home garden store and find some sort of pesticide, please do your due diligence and, try and figure it out before you just do a massive spraying. But yeah, that's a very good point. All right, there's a question. This came in. 1/3 conifers rule. Would that include any evergreen plants in that ratio, or is it just the conifers?
This rule was just for conifers. And so when I see a rule like that, I take it with a grain of salt. Some gardens just don't have room. You know, I have some little tiny globe conifers in my garden and some really neat ones with white tips just to give interest to the garden. But, you know, there's no plant police out there. You can do what you want. It's
Yeah.
just, if you're planting a garden from brand new and you want ideas, you can use that as a basis to start. And then what do you like? That's basically it. What is going to give you pleasure to look at and to work in for many years?
And while I design my gardens, I always have to consult my husband because he has some very particular ideas about things. And so he and I try to coordinate and cooperate and I'll tell him the design elements and he'll tell me what he wants. And we just come to a happy compromise. So I hope that answered your question about the conifers. Again, our presentation today has been recorded and will be available in the next couple of days. So if you want to review a particular slide and the name of a plant, it will be available. And that would be at cmastergardeners.org and under 10-Minute University. And also all the handouts and the information that Sean has been posting in the chat box is also going to be available for you to use, because there was a lot of technical information in this presentation. Just as a reminder, we will have a short survey after this, and it really helps us when you answer that honestly and put something in the comments to help us to grow as educators and presenters. So we really appreciate that. And if you still have questions, perhaps about a pest that may be in your garden, you can take photographs and submit them to www.mastergardeners.org. And there are live people there looking at those pictures, doing research. I know, Laura, you're one of those live people. Thank you for your work on that. And we will try and give you the best advice that we can give. And that advice is always research-based. It is been approved by Oregon State University, and it's going to be to you free and to improve your home garden. Yes.
There was a question about how far back to prune your Butylan.
Oh.
And so as long as it has a good shape, I cut out the damaged parts, the old parts, but I would like my Butylan to be get as big as it can. And I'm also, because my Butylan are in containers, I don't want the root ball to be so big. So I try to keep it within 3 to 4 feet, but that's mine. I've seen the Butylans be as big as shrubs, big as small trees. In fact, in that garden of Darcy Daniels, she has a Butylans that may be 6 feet. So that's one place where you would really need to look at the plant tag to see how big it is. It's just, that is something that is what you like your Butylan to look like and where it is and how big you want it to be. I had one that I had in a container, unfortunately, at my other house, and it was 8 feet. And it was hard to get it in and out of the greenhouse each year. And so it went to heaven.
And maybe some people are at the point where they're still cleaning up the winter mess. Why don't you tell us about your 3D system for cleaning up shrubs and trees?
So damaged, dead, and diseased are always taken away. And because they will never recover, and you don't want the diseased ones infecting your other plants. My fourth one is deranged, and that's the one I did in a seminar. And that's where you have a limb that goes sideways. You want to take that out because the plant you will never have a nice looking plant with the strange branch that goes off.
Yeah, and if you are taking care of diseased branches be sure to sanitize your loppers, your clippers, your saw, and that can be done easily with a bleach solution in a spray bottle, and then just wiping it down with a rag and then washing that rag.
And also, you don't want to put that diseased in your compost. You want to put that in your garbage or something else.
Good point. Okay, well, I think that presentation was so comprehensive that people are just thinking about what they want to do in their garden. And I want to thank you so much for your wonderful presentation today. Well prepared. I want to thank the photographers who contributed to that. Just beautiful examples of the different options you have when planting a high impact garden.
Thank you.